What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ergo Weekly AMA. It's just me today. Dan's in Dubai. He's been taking some meetings at various conferences. He did send in a pre-recorded video to say hello to everyone. So, Andy, why don't we throw that on screen and let everyone see what Dan's been up to?
Greetings, my fellow Ergonauts. This is Dan. Usually from Japan, but now coming to you from the UAE and beautiful Dubai. And behind me is beautiful Dubai. See? It's always warm, always sunny. Always warm, always sunny. Sometimes really sunny and sometimes so warm that you can probably cook an egg on your head. Not there just yet, but I think in about a month, when it gets above 50 Celsius, that's really, really hot for people who are using the foot per furlong system in the US and the UK, the Fahrenheit system. By then you could probably cook an egg on your head and not even know it happened. So make good breakfast on your head, walk around. Don't walk around, actually. I've been here when it was that hot. You don't want that. This is great. This is great. Right now, it's just beautiful right now, as you can see. Got a little bit of that desert sand going on right now. A little bit of desert dust. Other than that, a wonderful city behind me, and has been a very eventful week. So let me just give you some of the details of what has been happening this week. So first and foremost, I have been and spoke at the AIBC conference, which was held at the Intercontinental in Dubai Festival City. A very, very good conference. I spoke at 2 panels and actually met some amazing people there that I believe would be very beneficial for the Ergo ecosystem. And so first of all, I did speak to a couple of exchanges about listing Ergo at the summit, both of which are pretty good exchanges. Really up and coming, getting a lot of traffic would really help add liquidity to our to Ergo, which is what we want. We want more movement, more options. So I'm really excited about that. I'm currently talking with them. And I will have some more details once we have something, something solid. But again, very optimistic about Ergo. Love the project. So, I'm hoping something good develops out of that. And I think something will. Also, several projects that are, first of all, one project that you might have already heard called Unigrid. I have been spending a lot of time with the Unigrid project and been talking to them about utilizing Ergo for their smart contract functionality. So we're going to continue that conversation. And again, a very good up and coming project. They've been around for a little while now. So you might want to check them out. They specialize in distributed internet. So a lot of different things that they're going to bring online. Just check them out. Okay, I'm not going to go too much into detail here because that could take another hour. But a really promising project, and I'm hoping to get them to utilize Ergo for their functionality, for smart contracts and other things. Also, a couple other really good projects. Some having to do with sovereign identity, some having to do with supply chain. Tracking and traceability. So again, a lot of really exciting synergies forming out here, and this is just. I'm not looking at the camera, looking away. I'm looking at my notes here because there's so much that happened. I have my notes on the screen in front of me, so when I'm doing this, I'm actually looking at my notes so that I can give you guys a solid and concise rundown without going on tangents. Several really good projects, really good synergies out here. And this is actually just the beginning. So next week, we have the Binance Summit and ETH Dubai at the same time. as one would expect, two giant conferences happening at the same time. But anyway, we'll manage. I'm going to be at both conferences, and I will be, again, doing my thing. And I'm hoping to also meet a lot of really good and exciting people and projects there, and to preach the gospel of Ergo to them and how amazing Ergo is, and that, you know, they should go full erg. Okay, now moving on. Another really good connection that I made at the summit was with a couple of really good European liquidity providers that could potentially bring liquidity to our ecosystem to help us pick up that volume we're talking about. So again, spoke to them, you know, obviously personally. Well, there's just me, so I guess I speak to everybody personally, but spoke to both of these liquidity providers. Seem to be really, you know, just really solid, grounded companies. So we will continue those conversations. And again, if we can work this out, I think it would be a big value add for the ecosystem. And moving on, so Ergo Hack winners. So I've already announced my Ergo Hack winners. You can check them out again on Twitter. I've said it a bunch of times. So all the Ergo Hack winners, I believe, have contacted me, and I will be, as I promised, distributing the funds to the three winners very shortly. I'll probably take care of it, you know, in the next couple of days. So again, I appreciate your patience and waiting for me to pick the winners, and also appreciate your patience for giving me a couple more days to get these things sorted, because again, it's been really busy out here. In fact, I have a couple of meetings today to go to about Erg. And so, yeah, once again, I will be at ETH Dubai, and possibly Alex. I'm not sure about that. I think Alex was talking about coming to ETH Dubai as well. So it's going to be at very least me, and hopefully it's going to be, you know, a few of the Erg crew that will go to ETH Dubai. And as we know, you know, the Ethereum ecosystem is a really good place for us to, you know, get engagement into the Ergo ecosystem, as you know, many have spoken about that. And so, yeah, I will also be speaking to people over there and preaching the gospel of Erg. Well, that is it for me. My apologies for not doing this live today. The reason being is that I actually have a meeting at that time that I was just telling you about. So this is I am recording this for everybody, just to give you an update on what's been going on, and I will be doing these once again live starting this next week. So I hope everybody is doing well, and I'm super excited about what's been going on. And we all know that's been a little bit of a pump in action going on in the markets. I'm sure people are happy about that. But don't concentrate on the price. Concentrate on how amazing our ecosystem is getting, how we're growing, how every day there's something new happening, new projects. I mean, these projects in the Ergo Hack, it's just amazing, the kind of stuff that people are making in the Ergo ecosystem. That is our treasure. That is what makes us strong, and everything else will follow. Price doesn't determine value in this market. We have value added from participation. We have added value from growth, and price will follow. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will talk to you next week.
So my first question is going to be from Joe Halton. A few weeks ago, we'd been talking about ledger support, and he's looking for an update. The last time I talked to the team was this morning. They're currently working on that. They're back in their office. For those of you that are not aware, that team is primarily Ukrainian and had to get their family out, get their family situated due to a influx of people exiting the Ukraine. Well, it was not exactly the easiest situation in terms of lining up housing for their loved ones, but that appears to have been settled and they're back to work. So once I get updates and can kind of track when that's going to be finished, I'll let everyone know. Now, they did actually have basic ledger support complete, but one thing that we had asked is they support what's called P2S, which is pay to script. And what that will allow users to do is interact with dApps such as Ergo Decks from their ledger device, which really helps with the user experience. So thanks for your patience. It's not an ideal situation for really anyone, but it is what it is. Life happens and we adapt. So the next question I'm going to take is from DocMineX. I think this is a pretty decent question. He asks, what's the most meaningful metric for understanding true growth in the Ergo ecosystem? And goes through a couple of different options. I can say for me personally, the metric that I probably track the most is the hash rate. We're a proof of work chain, and that's where we derive our security. So that's something that, for me personally, I'm always kind of looking, okay, what is the network itself looking like? What's the security of the network? Are miners profitable? Because everything that is built on top of the Ergo ecosystem is dependent on the security that they bring to the table. If you get into some of the other metrics that are listed, TVL is a little bit wonky. Same with market cap, to be honest. You have, let's say, a set number, but that's not necessarily a reflection of liquidity. Sometimes you have projects, specifically in DEXs, that they have a very impressive market cap, and that's going to add to the total value that's locked, but it's not very liquid. So I don't think that it's always the best metric to gauge things by. Transactions per block is somewhat dependent on what's happening, right? You have events where you may have a new NFT project that drops, or a new token that comes out, and you have a surge in the network, and that's always going to kind of ebb and flow. The number of addresses are actually something that is hard to quantify because we're UTXO, right? And I actually see this a lot in like broader metrics where I have to ask the question, okay, if a firm is going to be, let's say, analyzing the amount of value that's being moved around in a UTXO, are they actually smart enough to realize that you always send your entire balance and then you get change back? And do they, let's say, reflect the value that's actually sent, or are they calculating the whole amount? Because you do have to subtract the change aspect of UTXOs, and I don't think that always happens, in my honest opinion. So it's important if you're looking at that metric generally to ask that question, because the reality is with some, let's say, entities that report blockchain metrics, my suspicion is that doesn't always happen. And so you can say, oh, we moved an incredible amount of value, but if I bought something for a tiny amount, but I had to send my entire balance in order to work within UTXO, if they didn't subtract the change, that's going to look a little sexier than it is. So keep that in mind. Looks like Mark dropped a couple of questions from other chats. I'm going to pick up a couple of those. I like this question. How do you envision the first iteration of Let's operating? And what would be the things you would like to see most traded on a Let's? So for those of you that don't know, a Let's stands for a local exchange trading system. Basically, what you do is you create a unit of account to encourage people to trade goods and services with each other. A Let's token is kind of a community credit and debt-based system that's not designed to be monetized necessarily. It's usually a tool to try to move outside of the actual monetary system. And there are a couple of really interesting things that blockchain brings to the table in terms of running a Let's. I would say the first thing that's most interesting is usually in, let's say, off-chain applications, you have some sort of council or people that control the account-based system that a Let's runs on. With blockchain, that's automated, so you naturally disintermediate power. The second is that you have the ability to plug it into technology that makes it a little bit more efficient, something like your phone, perhaps browser-based. I imagine the lowest hanging fruit for a Let's in the first iteration would probably be digital. We already have an existing community. You have people with multiple, let's say, talents, skills, goods, services that they could offer. And I think that it would be really interesting to see an Ergo-based Let's that allowed projects to cooperate with each other. You may have somebody that is a great writer. You may have somebody that's a good front-end developer. And it creates a system of honesty. That's what it's based on. Ultimately, a Let's system is designed to have an account model where you can simply see and track who actually pays their debts and who doesn't. Now, it's important to understand that debt really is not so much based on monetary value in that particular system. It's more based on voluntary agreements and exchange. But we have people in society, and it's just kind of human nature that they want to eat and they don't want to pay for it, so to speak. They don't want to give back. They don't want to contribute. And Let's systems kind of assist at identifying who is actually trustworthy in terms of, do they give back relative to what they take? And if you create a group of people that are willing to support each other, there's actual, tremendous value of that, because we all have different assets, skills that we could bring to the table. And the ideal with that type of system is simply to bootstrap community participation. It's not so much a system that's designed that I want to profit off of you. It's more like, let's collaborate and use a system of account to try to make sure that we're honest. What do I owe? What have I taken? What have I given? So I'm excited to see that roll out. I think the e-Let's is probably step one. I definitely would be excited to see off-chain, local communities try to spin up. You do have a lot of organizations that perhaps we could work with, partner with, plug that into. I think that would require, let's just say, ambassadors, somebody to, kind of assist groups in terms of adoption and how this works, how to run it. We've had that discussion quite a bit, Alex and I, in terms of, how do we keep the fees low? How do we make the user experience friendly? And, ultimately try to create little counter economies that are resilient. That's the end goal with that type of system. Let's catch up on the questions. I'm going to take a question from Lucas. He said, do you see any risk for the network security in the short term because of EIP 27? I'll start there. The actual reduction in block rewards is less than 20%, right? And in crypto world, that can happen in a day. I haven't really checked today to see what prices are doing, but that type of movement is really not too extreme in the crypto markets. I do think that the price action could probably offset that in a relatively short period of time. So I wouldn't think there's any large risk. Now, long term, you do have considerations that we need to take into account. I'm a big advocate of developing a framework to launch native tokens to miners. I do know that, we do have the potential to build out side chains that can create merged mining rewards. I guess potentially even you could have a proof of stake side chain where, the mining pools themselves operate as some of the validators and could pass rewards on to miners. I would like to see miners get paid. EIP 27 did kind of take from their basket. And I think that as a community, we do need to think, what's the best way to incentivize mining? That security subsidy is important. They invest in hardware, they run a business. And in my mind, anyway, I would like to see them be profitable. It says, I suppose that the total hash rate is going to drop proportional to the block reward reduction. Yeah, it will a little bit. That's something that I think we can offset just through growth. Ergo at this point is in a position to grow pretty well this year, I believe. We have seen a lot of development with community wallets, dApps. We have ErgoPad that has developed a staking framework. So we do have foundational things that are coming together. And, as we build on top of that, I think we can deliver more value, which ultimately is the goal. Next question is from Planet Sigma. So the question is, how bridge developments are doing? Any ETA? Well, I do know that Alex is going to Dubai next week. He's going to be working with the Susi team. They already have the Ergo bridge on testnet. That particular bridge is going to bring in stable coins that exist, on other ecosystems into the Ergo network. That's one of our first goals, USDC and USDT. I'm sure he'll be there playing around with it. Now, I was actually going to make a video for the Rosen Bridge. I tried last night, but I actually had deer around my house and my dog was freaking out the whole time. So that didn't quite pan out, but I do plan on getting that out today. I know that MHS has been putting together some of the parts of the bridge that will work with Cardano, and he'll be rolling that out. It's a pretty nice framework. One thing I'm really like about it is that it's based, on Ergo. So whenever you have a bridge set up, right, you have to ask, where is the logic that's actually controlling the bridge? And when it's distributed by, two partners, every time you add a chain, you add additional complexity and potentially a point of failure. The Rosen bridge is anchored on Ergo. Most of the logic occurs on Ergo and the validation. So adding new chains to that particular framework minimizes risk relative to just having validation distributed from two chains. And that ideally will help with auditability in terms of, making sure that adding a new chain is not as painful, doesn't require as much auditing. So I think that once that's live, that will certainly help us add multiple ecosystems at a shorter time frame, with better assumptions. Let's see. I like this question. Hi, why is it taking so long to list Ergo in another exchange? Well, Ergo has a disadvantage here, and that is that we are an actual mainnet blockchain. Another disadvantage in being a mainnet blockchain is we are custom built, right? So if you're looking at how a listing occurs on an exchange, the first question you have to ask is this a mainnet or is this a coin? right? So let's say we were a coin on top of a existing blockchain that an exchange already supports. Usually their engineers have a framework for onboarding that. It actually doesn't take that much technical work. They have kind of a guide sheet that they go through in terms of how to integrate a coin based on, coins they usually already support. And so that process is relatively fast. They already have a lot of infrastructure that exists that they are basically plugging a new native asset into. If you look at Ergo, we actually have to work with the exchange to build the underlying infrastructure. We have to build a wallet. We have to synchronize it with their trade engine, which is different from exchange to exchange. Then we have to go through testing. And, when you have an exchange that potentially is moving millions of dollars of value a day, that testing needs to be relatively rigorous. It needs to be well done. So that creates a much longer integration period for a mainnet. And it also, to some degree, puts us at a disadvantage just from a business perspective, right? In order to get listed on exchange, usually there is some ask involved. And so if you're running a business and you're like, okay, well, I can take customer A and I can do a minimal amount of work and gain the same profit versus customer B, where I have to custom engineer and design something. Generally, exchanges are going to favor A. Why? Because it's better for their business model, which I understand. And one thing we have going for us is, as we see projects building on top of Ergo, exchanges start to look at our network differently. They start to say, okay, well, if we add this, base infrastructure, the wallet, and we also design a path for native token support, well, it kind of clears the way for them to do additional business with new projects on top of Ergo. And we're starting to see that change. But being that we're a mainnet, we're custom, a lot of blockchains kind of are re-engineered of, let's say, existing frameworks. You have a lot of Bitcoin forks that kind of follow the same technology that Bitcoin does. It's not that different. You have a lot of Ethereum forks that's kind of the same story. Ergo is its own unique animal when it comes to exchange and engineering, and that adds time, unfortunately. Let's see. Got a question from Louis Vatra. How will we prevent network issues by noodle-based tokens in the future? That's the story of the week, I guess. We have a new noodle token that somebody minted. They airdropped it to, I think, 50-some thousand wallets and 3 transactions, which is relatively impressive. But it did create some issues on our network. It was kind of like an organic DDoS attack. I think the first thing that we can do to prevent that is potentially raise fees. If you have low fees, the ability to spam the network is cheaper. So that's the main place to start. I think miners should probably consider raising the transaction fees on Ergo a little bit to prevent that in the future. Now, what else can we do? It's actually been built into the node that it will mute those type of transactions that are, let's say, too large or come across as kind of a distributed denial of service attack. That's already been plugged into the node. Now, when you have an active project, you'll see that Alex pushes reference clients on a really regular basis, right? I mean, we might see a new one every week or two, and that's just a sign of the back-end development that's happening. That's somewhat uncommon in this space. Now, part of the issue that happened with Noodle token, and I guess our nodes got noodled, or the old ones, was that we had people that were not running current versions of the reference client. And that's something that certainly on our end at the Ergo Foundation, we could improve communication, and that would assist in preventing that type of thing in the future. So that tells me I need to go around poking everyone saying, hey, if you're an important infrastructure provider in our network, you need to stay in sync with the network. So I think we can definitely improve on that in the future. Didn't create any large network issue. It did kind of fill up KuCoin's mempool with noodle tokens, and so that caused them to go offline and clear their mempool. That's never good to see, but it's kind of growth pains. I don't see it as a huge negative. I guess I find a little bit of humor in it, and the drops in and of itself is pretty impressive. I think everybody that holds more than one Ergo now has some noodle tokens. So enjoy. Let's see. I'll answer this. Can you confirm or deny that Ergo is in the testnet phase on any exchanges? Yeah, we are in the integration and testing phase in a few places. The next question is from Robert Smith. He said, have you considered adding Ergo full node to Umbrel or Start 9? That seems like that would capture some of the Bitcoin maxis attention. I think we definitely need to build out a robust full node wallet that has support for off-chain infrastructure. I think that would be amazing to see. Now, what would that do is it would allow more full nodes in the network, which certainly helps with consensus rules. And it would also lower the barrier of entry for people to run bots. In extended UTXO, we're going to see an increased need for people to participate in off-chain services. And probably we will see the tokenization of that, where there is an incentive for people to run off-chain services. And it, to some degree creates like a type of light mining, where you're not really participating on consensus of the blockchain itself, but you are working to create trustless assumptions in transactions. And that's actually quite important. As I get into the Rosen framework, you have one group in that two-layer authorization process that's called watchers. And basically what they do is they watch and report transactions. Now, distributing that creates more of a trustless environment. It's somewhat similar to the distribution of work in proof of work, where if you have multiple actors that are performing the same work and it's distributed between them, it becomes much more difficult for a single actor to influence the outcome. So full node wallet, I fully support. Now, capturing the attention of Bitcoin maxis, I don't see that as too valuable, right? They're in love. Let them be in love. Love is a good thing, I guess. Sometimes it goes a little too far. I think sometimes maximalism becomes like a weird, let's just call it religion, where people are not open to new ideas, new concepts. I don't think that is necessarily good for the technical evolution of our space as a whole. So, if someone doesn't have ears and doesn't have eyes, I don't see much point. If they're willing to watch or learn or listen, sure, you can, definitely reach them in some way. Just depends on who. All right, what do we have next? I like this question. How would the Ergo Foundation use their funds if Ergo mooned? How would they use it if it tanked? Well, one thing I will tell you about Alex in general is that he is a pretty conservative character. And what does that mean is that he tries to say, okay, well, based on the value that we spend, what's the best long-term return? And that's been very development focused in Ergo. The Ergo Foundation in and of itself is relatively small in comparison to a lot of the DAOs or entities that are behind blockchains. You know, when we started out, the total emission of the Ergo Foundation was over 4%. And one thing you have to remember is that, you know, being that we've been around for a while, the price of Ergo was quite low. So it kind of naturally created this mentality that we need to be conservative, we need to conserve value and try to deliver the maximum amount of development and tooling we can with the least amount of cost. I don't see that changing, in all honesty. I know you have a lot of big VC-backed entities that, you know, are like, hey, let's go throw a Monaco yacht party, right? I don't ever see Ergo trying to compete with that. I don't know if it creates, let's say, the right incentives. I think the Ergo Foundation first should work with education and developing open source frameworks that are reusable, right? And I often create the comparison here to Ethereum. One thing that they did amazingly well was they promoted the education around Solidity, right? So when Solidity first came out, it was pretty high level, it was new. There were not a lot of developers out in the world that knew how to play with it or work with it. And through going through the process of creating open source frameworks and tooling around working with Solidity, it's become extremely popular. And also, it's become much easier to where the barrier of entry is lower. Now, what does that do? It's created not just massive growth on, you know, the Ethereum blockchain, but how many EVM chains out there either use Solidity or Ether.js? A ton. And so it's not something that I think we even have to reinvent the wheel with, right? There's already an existing framework to saying, okay, you have a new smart contract model, you have a new smart contract language. How do you encourage the adoption of it? Because that adoption of it leads to growth, right? And I think that's probably one of the most important roles of the Ergo Foundation, aside from just general marketing and market access, because you do need a central entity to do business in this world. And the Ergo Foundation does serve that to the community. But ideally, the Ergo Foundation is somewhat of a temporary entity. I would like to see the community kind of decentralize it over time. I know that's a goal that Alex has shared. And hopefully we create the right incentives and frameworks and educational tools that allows new developers to come on and get creative. You know, there's a question that gets asked every once in a while, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? And I always think that question is a little bit funny because the goal of a decentralized system is to give power to users and developers, right? I'm not the guy to answer that. I would like to see good open source frameworks that are reusable. I'd like to see education certainly be at the forefront to where we have more developers coming on and building on our network. But what they actually build and what's popular, I have no damn idea, you know, especially if you look at, let's say Ethereum is a good example because it's been around a while. You know, you had a thing where you had cats and then you made new cats. It's kind of random and unpredictable. You have, you know, Uniswap, DeFi protocols, name services. That came from the creativity of the developer community. And so our goal ultimately is to empower them. And they'll answer that question based on the ideas and passion that they have. Let's see. This is a silly question. Dan is red. Did he sell his ERG to Dubai and the price pump? Well, if he did, we're going to have a yacht party on Dan's new yacht in Dubai. I don't think he did, but if he did, that means you're all invited to Dan's new yacht. It'll be great. I'm going to answer a question from Bravo. He said, what are your thoughts on VTC and ADA pairs on Ergo decks? Do you like the wild west style, or do you prefer dictatorships? Well, that's actually a good question. You know, you see that on dexes. When Ergo decks allowed custom pool creation, that anybody anywhere can now add liquidity and create a pool. Unfortunately, one of the first things you saw was someone, kind of created a shitty fake pool, right? And then it opens the question, okay, so if we want to be decentralized, what can we do to educate users, to allow them, basically notify them and say, hey, this isn't, what it looks like. It isn't what you're thinking going into it. And now there is, the easiest solution is to just be a dictator, have the team say, okay, I'm going to whitelist or blacklist tokens, and that does create an element of gatekeeping in this industry. To some degree, the central exchanges are the gatekeepers of liquidity in this industry, and that also can happen on decentralized exchanges. You also have the wild west approach, which is just let things play out how they play out. And I don't think that's necessarily the best, just because it does kind of disproportionately allow people to get taken advantage of. Personally, I think the best option is to create multiple competing solutions where, let's say you may have a DAO or an individual, or it just depends. It could be developers, it could be users, creating multiple frameworks that go through projects. They say, okay, is this team legitimate? Do they have a website? Most importantly, do they have a GitHub? Do they actually develop anything? Is this just one of these funny money tokens that, I guess some of them build a community around it, so it does have some, value. What that is, I have no idea. But I do think that if you get independent auditing across the board, what you'd find is some actors would naturally kind of take lead in terms of getting reputation and trust. And ideally, if they get reputation and trust, what would happen is they would build APIs that dApps could work with and pass on information that is beneficial to the end user. One thing that I know Alex has pushed for is a concept called know your assumptions, which is not popular in the blockchain space because it requires, investigation and critical thinking, and to some degree disclosure. Even in like a smart contract, you can say, okay, the smart contract is audited, but that doesn't necessarily address the assumptions of how is it updated, who controls it. There's sometimes additional complexity that people don't look at, that it might be good for them to understand the risk or assumptions that they're getting into. So I think that the ultimate goal with, let's just say, shit coins on a DEX is education. That's going to solve that. I hope we get multiple solutions, and then it's up to the community and certain dApp developers to say, okay, well, whose information do they find valid and why? Hopefully that's an answer they can give to you, the user, and it's something that satisfies, your needs in terms of trying to say, okay, is this real? Is this fake? I think the dictator thing, I understand why it exists, but it's kind of far from ideal. The Wild Wild West thing is just somewhat of a massacre, if I'm honest. So hopefully we can find some middle ground. Here I have a question about Minotaur Wallet. Is that going to be listed in the Apple App Store under the EF umbrella or individually? I don't know yet. The Apple App Store has actually been a bottleneck for us. We do have entity in Singapore. One thing that we needed to do to create a commercial account in the App Store is onboard banking for that entity. That's something we're working on, but it's been incredibly slow. And the reason it's been incredibly slow lately has been, international pressure and sanctions, and it's kind of put everything in like the multiple review process because banks don't want to inherit liability. They don't want to create problems for themselves. So that's actually slowed things down a little bit, which, banking isn't necessarily the friendliest industry for crypto projects anyway. There's generally quite a bit of review that we have to go through to onboard, and I'd say that has now been kind of compounded by the latest geopolitical developments. Fun. Not much we can do there other than keep working on it. All right, I got a question from Quokka. He said, can you release any info on marketing plans? I know you guys hired a marketing manager and would love to know some progress on this. So our goal at the Ergo Foundation is to try to empower the Ergo community. One thing that we recently did in terms of change was we hired a new marketing manager that represents the community. If you look at the ergoplatform.org Twitter, that is now run by the leader of the Sigma program, which is a collective of projects and developers and users and miners in the Ergo ecosystem. And it's my hope that what that opens up is kind of a force multiplier for the ecosystem, where we've built that base account kind of as the Ergo Foundation, and we're handing off that power to the ecosystem so that you guys can figure out, what makes sense in terms of marketing the actual projects on top of Ergo. It's important to understand that the average, let's call them normie, will look at a blockchain and say, okay, what can I do with it, right? And okay, most blockchains you can send transactions, right? That's not too special. I don't think a normal person is going to be impressed by that. But the projects that build on top of Ergo are ultimately going to be the driver of adoption. And so giving the community power to amplify what's being built and educate, new people as to what tools exist and why they exist and how to use them, I think there's a tremendous amount of value. Now we'll continue working with hackathons throughout this year, because education, it creates new frameworks, it helps onboard new developers. I think that is a great place to focus. I know that in the short term, people are much more interested in marketing and market access, but really if you take a step back and you look at the long term, developer adoption is going to be what drives value, drives development, and ultimately fills in the question, what does this blockchain do? What can I do with it? So I say that it's a good idea to focus there. I do think that as we roll out updates this year, we'll definitely get some marketing to broader audiences to learn more about Ergo, but sometimes that's kind of speaking into existing audience, and it's nice to kind of expand beyond the existing crowd in crypto. Is the Nautilus wallet officially approved by you? Well, it's open source. It's had a lot of developers from different projects playing with it. I was part of the testing process with that. And I think Nemo has done a really good job in terms of communicating with projects and getting people to try to break builds before they actually are released. I think that's the right way to develop open source tools, is to try to pull in as many people to break it and review it as possible. And I'm pretty happy with how that has been built out. Now, personally, I do like Safe Wallet as well. I think that, you know, having the Firefox build is definitely something users are going to enjoy. If you look at the Ergo Android wallet that Mr. Staffega put together, that dual phone cold wallet storage is, in my opinion, I kind of like it better than Ledger, to be honest. Ledger's a little funny device with little buttons. You know, having the touch screen and kind of the cold wallet that for me delivers a better user experience. I'm a big fan of that framework. We have Ergo, which I've played with a little bit. I don't think that I necessarily have a favorite at this point. I try to use and play with all of them. If I did, I would probably lean toward just the cold wallet on the mobile. I think that's a really nice framework. It saves people money, which is nice. You know, a Ledger is not the most expensive device on the planet, but most people will have some older device lying around that they can use. And I also think it's pretty cool that we're starting to see wallets and browser support kind of signing from the cold wallet. I hope that becomes somewhat of a standard, because I think that that use case just makes it easier for newer people, right? If I were to give somebody that's not really in crypto a phone, I think they're going to have a higher probability of success with a touch screen that they can see versus some little USB stick with buttons on the side. So I hope that is something that all the wallet developers try to support, because most people will have an old device around, at least that's relatively common. All right, I have a question from Sam Lambert, who's asking about synergies with the UTXO Alliance, such as Nervos. What are your personal views on this? What use cases would you like to see? Sure. Ergo is, I guess, a founding member of the UTXO Alliance. We started. I actually invited Komodo initially. We work together through the BPSAA. It's a really nice project that runs on UTXO. And so I invited them to join, and they were actually able to. I think that long term, there's a lot of value in terms of layer 2 solutions. I think that's probably the area that shows the most promise, in my personal opinion. I definitely think there's interop potential, bridge potentials that are there, and being that there's already a group that works together, I think that there's definitely a future there that we're going to grow into. You know, I was really excited about the UTXO Alliance, but it is more research focused at this point. But that ultimately lays the groundwork for frameworks and development, which delivers value, but that's a process. So my personal views are that that type of collaboration is great. It, certainly creates common solutions to common problems, and hopefully, we see a lot of implementation based on the discussions and research that's happening. What are some DApp ideas you want to see made on Ergo? Well, I think competing stablecoins is certainly a nice framework to build out. I don't think that's necessarily going to be one stablecoin to rule them all, but it's a really fascinating proposition, in my opinion. Stable value is somewhat of a unicorn in the real world. The currencies are going up and down, commodities are going up and down. Personally, I would like to see some sort of basket, but that's going to take a lot of development. Where if you could create a commodity basket, perhaps some sort of currency basket that's tied to inflation, maybe even throw in a couple of cryptos that act to represent our space, and have some collective basket. I think that would be fascinating. Definitely, DeFi is something that our community could build out. DeFi is kind of the same question. It's like, what level of inflation or use case is viable, and what level of inflation is just insane? That's kind of an open question at the moment. There are tons of projects that are kind of bringing their own individual answer. So we'll see. Sometimes I make a joke. I want to see an app Erg slap where, we send Jenny around the world to go slap some people, but I'm just talking shit with that. So any last questions before I wrap it up? It looks like I'm about due for a break. It's been an hour. All right. It's been a pleasure, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.